the search for a serious revolution in values is on, it must come from the spiritual realm. And the spiritual realm, in practical terms, means the imagination. The frontier of our species is the imagination. Now we have to take that slogan and somehow turn it into a technology. How can we go to the place where ideas come from? How can we somehow separate our architectonic fantasies from the ongoing momentum of the planet? Both are valid, you see, but we have to recognize that what we are is almost an ontological transformation of life. We are to life what life is to the inorganic realm, and we need to separate ourselves from the planet. The planet, the entire planet, should be a bioreserve. How many of these oxygen-rich, water-heavy worlds are there? Now, of course, it's pie in the sky to talk about moving all heavy industry into space or to the asteroid belt or something like that. But on the other hand, when you extrapolate a visionless future, even as much as 3 or 4 decades into the future, you see the accumulation of problems on such a scale that then there will be no pulling out of the power dive. Because once a society passes a certain point in the process of dissolution, you just don't make a decision to change. I mean, it's too late. You don't have the engineering skills. You don't have the technical community. You don't have the resource extraction ability. It's all slipped through your fingers. Well, I think psychedelics are catalysts to thought, to imagination, to understanding. And we are like somebody who has been dead drunk while the house was burning down around us. And now we have awakened to the sound of falling timbers and the smell of smoke. And we have a certain limited amount of time to figure this situation out. We don't have 500 years or 100 years. Anybody who speaks in terms of solutions that require 100 years or even 50 years to implement doesn't understand the dynamics of the situation. History has some kind of will for its own transcendence. And I think we are now so close to the dropping of the mask and the realization of what the game was all along that the sense of this nearby revelation informs all of our lives. I mean, drives our dreams, our thoughts, the choices we make, why we're here in this room this evening. It's very big news, I think. The world is not at all as we suppose it to be. I find that very amazing. I mean, that's the bottom line for me. I always think of these things in reference to that scene in 2001 when the anthropoid apes are leaping up and down and screaming and pointing at the monolith. That's what we're doing here in this room. That's what we're doing here in this room. I mean, the subject of this weekend is unspeakable. You know, it can only be obliquely indicated. Whatever you say about it is not true. And yet it is somehow the informing mystery of being, and it is not remote. That's the big news. That the previous human model, which is that we are all poor, groveling sinners, and that gnosis will trickle down to us from the wonderful folks up on top of the steep building nearby where they're conducting mysterious business with liver readings and stargazing. That model is insufficient and insulting, considering the situation we have been brought to by those very stargazing men wearing dresses. So I think what we have to do now is just take the machinery into our own hands. It's a matter of personal responsibility to find out what the world is really doing, what it is. What do you think's going on? What do you think this is all about? Who do you think you are? What do you think English is? How do you really cognize notions like the future, the past, where I've been, what I want? I mean, it's in Moby Dick, Melville says, if you would strike through the mask. Everything is a mask. And just behind that mask lurks, well, what? That's the question. I mean, it's the thing which informs every individual existence, and that's fine, and people have always lived in the shadow of that mystery. But it is our weird privilege to live in an age where there is also to be a collective dropping of the mask, a moment of melting and recasting of what reality itself is to be. So, discussing this, convincing ourselves of it, and then working out the minute details of how it all is inevitable and couldn't be any other way. I'm really conflicted in always in these situations because I feel, for some reason, I suppose it's an ego trip, that I want to be correctly perceived. I, as a person, want to be correctly perceived. And I think of myself as a reasonable person, a person sensitive to concepts like evidence, causality, so forth and so on. And yet, what I have to say is like completely unreasonable. I mean, a messenger bearing news of complete madness approaching from all directions. So, and I got into that position by staying pretty close to the principle of skepticism. I'm not a believer. In fact, when the aliens draped the mantle over my shoulders, they said, it's because you don't believe in anything. This is why you that's why you got this far, because you didn't believe in anything. And it's a good method. Normally, it's a method spawned out of futility. You'll say, well, fuck it, I don't believe in anything. But it's also very good for getting rid of a lot of crap, because the real stuff can take the test of skepticism. The real stuff doesn't have to be bowed down before, and it works. It's on its own. The news is, and it's very hard news to get out because it's news about the structure of reality. The news is coming back from, 50, 60, 100 years of anthropologists, ethnographers, geographers, botanists, dealing with the most quote-unquote primitive people in the most remote parts of the world. The news is that reality is not at all as we imagined it to be, and that our prowess in the technical sciences is simply a cultural artifact, an accomplishment of ours. Some people do great tattoos. We send spacecraft to the stars. But it doesn't mean we understand anymore. And in fact, the evidence is building that our style of society is the historical equivalent of a temper tantrum. That it has no viability. It's completely self-limiting. It's destructive. And it hands nothing on to its receivers. So, I sort of talk to this group, and all the groups that I talk to, from two points of view. I'm trying to convince you of something, and yet reason dictates that I assume that you're already convinced, pretty much. So then it's also an effort to figure out what it is we're so convinced of, and then what is so great about it. Because I think some kind of this is a real mystery, the only one I know. This is the thing that you hope exists and assume doesn't if you're a reasonable person. Because it's that, all the dreams of childhood, all the sense of magic and the dissolvability and transcendability of boundaries is returned, is affirmed in this experience.